on episode 26 of the Potomac RPG Podcast. Whenever I think about the past, it brings back so many memories.
Welcome one and all to the Potomac RPG Podcast, your source for old news, tired conversation, and mediocre advice for all of your favorite tabletop role-playing games. I'm your host and character whose backstory completely conflicts with the goal of the campaign, Adam.
I'm your super tragic, emotional black hole of an upbringing that led me to 6-month assassin school, Sarah.
And I'm your nameless character with a mysterious past, Matt.
Ooh, mysterious. I like it. Well, yeah, thanks for being on, guys. A common trope that we see in RPGs is the extreme amount of time and energy, or sometimes no time or energy at all, put into character backstories. Some players come to the table with this 10-page treatise on their character, while some others consider their race and their class to be all the information that's needed to play. So, yeah, I'm curious, Matt, when it comes to developing character backstories, what is your process? What do you focus on?
Well, I don't do the 10-page backstory because, it's quite possible that your character will be killed in the opening scene at a dinner table. In which case the 10-page backstory would be something of a waste. Usually what I like to do for characters is I kind of come up with 2 to 4 hooks, I guess I would call them. Kind of 2 to 4 uncommon aspects to that character. And they could be simple things like, their origin, their family, their loyalties, complications like enemies, vices they might have, weaknesses, that kind of thing. And I come up with a handful of those, and then I sort of build out from there and try to fit them together. And usually that's a good way of coming up with sort of a good kind of basic gimmick for the character. And then as the story goes on, as the game goes on, then you can sort of fill out other things from those hooks.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that disappointed me early on with D&D was like they have the bonds and ideals section, and it always seemed like there's 6 different choices for your character. Like, you can come up with much better ones. I guess if you're really stuck, you can look at that and draw from one of that list or roll randomly. But that always seemed to be kind of like that doesn't really give you a whole lot to work with. And I love this idea of, instead of telling me, all this stuff that you've done, tell me what is going on that is still conflicted within you. Like, what can I or what can we as a group explore? What kind of plot hooks might be able to be pulled out of there? So I think that's a really good way of looking at it. Sarah, how about you? How do you do it?
Yeah, even as a writer, I don't do the 10-page backstory, so to speak. But I do. I always look at where I want the character to start, like emotionally, and in the also like where they could possibly grow. And then I go in and manufacture the backstory from there. And the reason I kind of do it in reverse is because where I want to start is where the most of my gameplay is going to happen. And it's going to happen with these, other players at the table. So I want to make sure that I have a character that is going to jive or conflict with the other characters in a way that is meaningful, and also where they can sort of impact my character's growth one way or another. So, for example, like Orly, I knew I kind of wanted her to be a little bit optimistic, but also street smart. And so I knew she had to have like a background that was probably a little bit more loving and warm, if a little bit, not entirely perfect, if that makes sense. But she probably came from a family that kind of gave her that optimism, and then she lost them. So there's a little bit of tragedy, but overall, like she wasn't tortured. She wasn't on the streets living as an urchin like her whole life. It was just like a natural part of just trying to survive. And I wanted to retain that optimism. And it's been cool to be in this group because she's had a lot of challenges around that optimism, both from how we approach the enemies and what we do to them, as well as like just how Takiri and even Riptide last night sort of lent their points of view on things, and so that's having an impact on her and how she's shaped, and that all, of course, is informed by her backstory. So I guess in a way I kind of work back.
Well, yeah, I'm curious with you guys, how, when it comes to the backstory, do you think it's more important in the sense of you getting a feel for your character, or more important in the sense of having some in-game real stuff happen because of that backstory? Like, what emphasis do you put on it? Is it to get in character, or to be able to do something once you're in game?
Well, I mean, for me, I think it more or less fleshes out the character's, motives. Actors always like, the joke is, what's my motivation, right? And D&D, has this kind of vague alignment system, which I've never really been a huge fan of. So for me, I think having character aspects that just sort of describe how the character would behave, react, and what they want is, I think that fleshes out the character more than saying that you're awful good or chaotic neutral or whatever. And so I think, that, like for example, I think we use Nalkuth as an example. So in this campaign for our listeners, I'm playing this guy who seems to have, from a remote village, who seems to have some fish-like characteristics, right? And so that makes the character inherently insular and untrustworthy and strange and disturbing to those around him. And so his worldview, so it creates a character where his worldview isn't necessarily the same as everyone else. And that didn't come around because I said, I want to make this character who is that way. It was just, as I thought about the hooks I created for the character, it kind of said, yeah, this person would probably be like this. And I think that kind of defines, the motives and how we act. And it can also be used for plot hooks in the present if the DM wants to run with them.
Yeah, Nelkuth is such a cool character too, man. I really, really enjoy him. And Norley has no idea what he is yet. Like she's gonna try and figure it out. But it's part of that mystery is part of the fun of dealing with them. So
Well, my biggest regret from this adventure is not pulling in some kind of Shape of Water plot hook for Nalkuth here, just to really explore that a little bit. But Sarah, whenever you're dealing with your characters, kind of same question to you. What has the emphasis for you? Is it what happens in game, or for you to get a feel for your character?
It's kind of both. I'm definitely probably weighting what happens in game a little bit more, because I want actionable sort of insights about my character that I can use as a springboard for conversation, for motivation, for fears, all the little things that Matt mentioned, like vices and virtues and stuff. And if there's a DM who is going to focus also on weaving in backstory, then I'm going to probably spend a lot more time, like what's a crush that got away, or what was this character bullied, a little bit more of the nuances of the backstory, just so there's more threads for the DM to pull. So yeah, I guess it depends on the DM and what kind of information they're looking for. And then also, of course, yeah, I want to make sure that I have stuff I can work with the character in the moment with this group.
Yeah, a lot of it is the length of the campaign you're dealing with, or the type of campaign you got going. Like, for example, the one that we're in now, this is going to end up being, 8 sessions? That's not a lot of time to dive in to the different backstories and pull out those plot hooks, because it's going to be over soon. So, that's a case where, as a player, you shouldn't be coming to the table with that 10 pager, because it's going to be really hard to introduce elements of it. But if you're doing a long-term campaign like Steve's campaign with Avernus, that's one that you want to really draw out a lot of those inner motivations and little hooks and knives here and there that the DM can pull out, because there's an extended period of time to be able to explore that. So definitely keep in mind what kind of campaign you're in right now in terms of how to build out that background. But in
Yeah.
terms of getting into some questions, let's get into the first one for the week and see if we can talk
Adam,
about backstories here.
I didn't want
This
to, Adam. I just wanted to on the backstory thing.
Yeah, go for it.
With the DM and it's true. Like the length of the campaign is going to inform basically how much richness we can get into of a backstory. Which isn't to say that like an 8-week campaign like yours, isn't that you're an awesome DM. So like, but we just don't have the time really to mine all this history for our characters. But with Steve's game, because it's so long, and because he was looking for things in the background, I was able to really, really dig in with Rushka and find some things. And it's because of that, it actually informs her fascination with Matt's character, and why she really, really likes him, and why there's an absolute threat from this particular shield. To her emotionally. So that's definitely an example more of like the background really, really bubbling up into the RP, as well as some of the interrelational sort of experiences for the characters.
Yeah, and it's almost an art form for the DM in terms of incorporating some of these backstories for as a player. It's so cool when a DM can give you a slice of that backstory in the real game happenings. But as a DM, that's really hard to work in sometimes, and you got to be careful because if you misunderstood something about their backstory,
Oh
or
yeah.
it's clunky, it can leave a bad taste in the mouth of your players. So it's definitely something that should not be done on a whim. It should be pre-planned. I think Steve is one who does such an excellent job of really focusing in on that specific backstory element and making it part of the plot. I think that's one of my favorite things about the Avernus campaign is how he's weaving that stuff through and the effect that it has on gameplay. So if you're a DM out there, take those backstory elements seriously because your players often do, and it can really make or break a game depending on how seriously you take those elements. But that said, let's get into some questions. This first post comes from Reddit user Scriv9000, who asks, abandonment backstory. So the druid from my campaign, who's my fiance, is a D&D noob and decided on a backstory that her mother was a human and her father an elf. She was abandoned by her mother as a baby and raised deep in the forest by druids. She has recently come of age and decided to adventure to seek her mysterious parents and understand her abandonment as well as generally finding herself. How can she find information on them without even a name to ask about? My current plan is that an alcoholic diviner wizard will feel bad for her sob story and cast legend lore on her for a very reasonable fee. I'd appreciate other ideas in case that NPC is killed by shenanigans or something. So, all right, first of all, what a great personal goal for a character to have. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Lots that a DM can work with here. Sarah, how would you set it up for the character to get information on her unknown parents?
So I would have so much fun with this, and
Yeah, I know.
seriously, okay. So there's so much mystery to mine, and I know that some of the people listening might be like, well, that's such a trope I abandoned as a kid. But keep in mind that storytelling, the first part of the story is always the orphan part, where they, maybe they had family and they lost them. Think of like Luke Skywalker, or even in Lord of the Rings, he didn't. His uncle just went away, right? There's always a point at which the protagonist is a on their own in some way or another. So abandonment is a great go-to, right? So this is what I would do. Oh my gosh, I'd have so much fun, especially if you have a good long campaign. So why was she abandoned? Let's if she's leaving that up to the DM, oh, that's great. I would have maybe like she's in town one day and she notices someone starts like following her and is like really interested in her, and maybe it's because she's like a spitting image of her mother. But so that would be like the first lead. And then maybe like some people are trying to kill her, but she doesn't know why, or she just all these like encroaching threats that seem to pop up, and then she can very reasonably sort of start getting more information about her mother, and maybe this was a forbidden sort of association, and that's why she's been abandoned. And there might even be something about her blood, either from an heritage or royalty, or maybe it's just that there's something very special about her, and they need her blood for something, maybe to complete a ritual or something like that. So, and that's why her mother hit her, or her parents hit her. So there's like so many things that you could do, and when you look at it from the player's point of view, this stuff is just happening. She's suddenly more immersed, like around these threats. She's looking around. She's trying to figure out what's going on. Why are people after her? And you could just meet her out all these little clues throughout the campaign until she finally can, find someone who maybe was her mother's handmaiden, or her father's, I don't know, like maybe it's a friend of her father's who's actually after her, or, it's just like, who pretends to be her friend. Like, you can have the betrayal in there. There are so many things that you could do to make this really, really exciting for her. I obviously don't want to hog it from all the other players at the table, but I mean, come on, you could totally dig into this.
I can feel the gears in your head like grinding away here, Sarah, on this. Like you said, there's so many options to work with here, and I really hope that the DM can build some good stuff around this. Matt, what would you do in this situation?
Yeah, wow. So Sarah really jumped on that. And Alex is very excited about the prospect, probably more so than I am. I would just ask the question, in the campaign world, like, is it is it normal for, young elves to go and sow their wild oats with humans, right? I mean, do you have philandering elves, leaving little bastard half-elf children, right? Because that could be a possible thing in the campaign, and maybe there's nothing special about it. It's just like, there's, this is another half-elf baby at the doorsteps of the monastery, you and 1,000 others. But if you do want it to have some importance, I mean, obviously there's, as Sarah mentioned, a lot of ways you can go. I mean, it could be a scandal, that involved some local elf community or local human community, if such a thing is frowned on. And there could be commonalities in physical appearance that, could lead plot-wise, or some rare trait that's been inherited. Or they might just be a local elf that has a philandering reputation. I mean, maybe it's just this particular elf, and this is like, Smooth B the elf, right? and he just goes around, and he's knocked up, like, over the course of his immortal lifespan, like, 500 human women, and he's got like 500 half sisters or half siblings running around. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can play this. Obviously, it depends on your setting.
I love this idea of like an elven Rumspringa, where like they're just, and I also love the idea of like putting like all this effort around finding the parents, and as a DM taking them through it, just in the end to find out that it was just some deadbeat dad that was like, oh yeah, well, it's just another one, on the list kind of thing. The heartbreak that player would feel
telling the character priceless. That her mother was just another notch on the bedpost.
Yeah, exactly. Great ideas. First off, I did want to say, awesome that you get the game with your fiance, and you're both of you involved in it. That's awesome. Be supportive of that. It's such a great thing that you're able to do. I mean, obviously, Sarah, you get to do it every week as well. And it's a wonderful thing that you get to share with somebody. In terms of kind of plot hooks, I think Sarah and Matt had some great ones. Doesn't necessarily have to be them finding, their parents. It could be the parents finding the player, or some lead coming down through that. But honestly, I had some ideas written down as soon as I heard Sarah's and Matt's. I was like, well, mine are shit. So I'll just
oh no, not at all. Not at all.
Those were great. I love them. Hopefully that gives you some really good ideas to use there, Scriv 9000. Would love to hear how you incorporate this backstory into your campaign.
I have news here.
And the sound of Ralphie the News Goblin can mean only one thing. It is time for Potomac RPG News. All right, so the big news this week was the release of Matt Mercer's unofficial new subclasses for the Paladin and the Monk. Got an article here from J.R. Zambrano at belloflostsouls.net that dives into this. But the new subclasses have also been added to DnDBeyond already. They're the Paladin subclass of Oath of the Open Sea and the Monk subclass Way of the Cobalt Soul. So, Matt, what do you think of these new unofficial subclasses that have been uploaded?
I think they're okay. I mean, I was looking over. I was looking over the Paladin one. I feel like what it sort of goes for. I kind of feel the Tempest cleric, at least mechanically,
I was thinking the same thing.
Does a little bit better. I think so. It has two abilities that kind of stand out to me that are either interesting or maybe need a little more clarification. So the first one is for the channeling option, the marine layer, where you the paladin can create a thick fog of cloud that surrounds you and follows you as you move. So that's kind of unique. We don't have fog clouds that move with the characters at this time. And the other thing about it that was also mechanically kind of interesting is that you and all creatures within 5 feet of you instead treat this fog as lightly obscured. So fog generally causes heavy obscurement, which blinds everyone.
Yeah.
But here you now have you and presumably creatures within 5 feet of you, which could start as your party members, although it could be an enemy later. Now we're only treated as lightly obscuring, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that means that they can see and attack opponents that may not be able to see and attack them. I'm not sure exactly how that works out mechanically. I don't remember what the rules are for lightly obscured, but it is different from the usual fog cloud, and I think that may open up some tactical options, especially in range.
Yeah, well, the thing I got about that, though, is like, what's the fog cloud got to do with the sea? Like, I really like
fog on the water, right?
Well, but it doesn't even say if you're on water. It's anywhere. So if I'm in a dungeon, in some cave with no water around, I can still somehow summon a fog cloud.
Well, Tempest Cleric gets fog cloud as a bonus spell. I mean, it is something that the fog is usually associated with shoreline. So.
Yeah, I don't know. It just whenever I read, I'm like there's so many water things that you can do. Like, did you have to bring in like an air thing? Yeah, I know.
I mean, as I said, it seems to be. I mean, maybe a slightly better version of what the Tempest Cleric gets as a spell, but again, I feel like there's a lot of overlap here. I'm not going to go through all the abilities. It has Aura of Liberation. That's actually very similar to the liberation or freedom domain of Pathfinder. So they sort of just it's group immunity to grapple and restrain, which is potentially useful, although not super interesting. I think the most tactically neat ability is the 15th level ability, the Stormy Waters ability, which is basically a reaction. When an enemy moves in or out of your melee range, you can hit them with a wave, which does a little damage, but can also knock them prone. Yeah. So that's actually pretty useful, right? Some enemy could spend all their movement moving in with you, and then you hit them with a as a reaction with a wave, knock them down, and then you get to wail on them while they're down. Nice. So that's actually pretty cool. So as I said, I think the class is okay, but I feel like it gets Call Lightning as a bonus spell, which is pretty awesome. Again, I feel like it sort of maybe steps on the Tempest Cleric's toes a little bit. And I think it's better for a Dex type Paladin because if you're going to be on the water, you don't want to be in heavy armor. And there was really nothing about water breathing here. Or
shockingly, right?
Yeah, I was kind of expecting it. So, you could play a heavy armor guy and still drown, even though you're an open sea Paladin, which would be pretty funny. So again, I think, I don't know, I kind of feel like maybe this class could use another round of revision.
Yeah, well, before we move on to the monk, let's stick on this Paladin a bit. Sarah, what's your takeaway from this Oath of the Sea Paladin?
I don't really have anything to add beyond what Matt said. I think he was very articulate in pointing out some of the the cons here. I love the idea of it as far as roleplay goes and stuff. It would have been nice to have either some water breathing or something a little bit more I don't know,
Thematic?
water related. Yeah, not like as much
Fish
sky
power.
stuff.
Fish
yeah,
power.
Fish power. Talk to Team Beast or something. Like I didn't see that. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it'd be fun though to try in a campaign, especially the one that we're doing right now with our pirates and stuff. I think that'd be cool. But yeah, like Matt said, your chances of drowning in heavy armor are pretty strong when you're just out on a ship and doing battle.
Well, yeah, the only thing that I would add on to what you said, Matt, was, I know 20th level abilities, they can be hit or miss, but the
You never get to them.
Yeah, you never get to them, but the mythic swashbuckler, it almost seems like they ran out of ideas, and they're like, well, we have all this kind of water theme and stuff, but everything seems very elemental in nature. With
Yeah,
Oath
I
of the
mean,
Sea.
the climbing I can kind of see. It's like, oh, you're on ship rigging or something, but
Yeah, but it's just
it's
like
not very
all of a
inspired.
sudden it's like, oh, and they can fight really well. Okay, well, all right, that's great. Like it's like, why couldn't you bring in some like massive ability that controls the water or something like that?
Yeah, it's not
instead?
very thematic. Like it's
No.
not like, oh, the paladin suddenly turns into like a giant water elemental or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, so that was the Oath of the Sea. Matt, take us through the way of the Cobalt Soul.
Yeah, I actually kind of like this class because I feel
right?
I feel like it fills sort of a niche that hasn't been there, which is that monks don't get a huge number of skills, and so this is definitely kind of a more skill RP type monk than a Kenshiro explode your head kind of monk, even though it does use pressure points. So as I said, I think I like this guy thematically. I mean, none of the abilities are overpoweringly amazing from a mechanical standpoint, but I think that they all link together very well in terms of the theme of the subclass. So if you're not playing like a power game thing, and who plays a monk for power gaming? Let's be honest. I think it adds a lot to the type of character. I mean, this idea that you can hit a guy and like learn stuff about them, and then the skills and the ability to gain expertise in several of the skills, I think, is nice because expertise right now is fairly rare. I mean, it's rogues and bards, or if you take a feat on it. So here you have on some limited number of skills, you can be the expert, right? So like knowledge, nature, I mean, that's wisdom. You probably in religion, you probably have high wisdom anyway because you're a monk. So if you're an expert in that, like you could have a monk who is actually more of an expert on religion than the cleric is, right? I mean, we've had in our campaign, our clerics not knowing anything about religion. so it's kind of so the monk knowing about religion kind of makes sense, and I just kind of like that. And it also has another mechanic which I like, which is that it can expend the key point. This is the 11th level ability, Mind of Mercury, to gain an additional reaction, and I kind of like that as sort of a class feature, being able to gain or temporarily gain or limited gain of an additional reaction or bonus action, because there's really no mechanics in the game like that right now. And I know they didn't want to have too many actions, but I do feel like having that special thing for an occasional character is actually a very nice add-on.
Yeah, I agree completely there. Well, Sarah, how about you? Any desire to play a Way of the Cobalt Soul monk?
So I've never played a monk, so I'm not as familiar with all of the different class details, but I will say I like the idea of knowing your enemy, which is emphasized with this particular class. And I think that it'd be very cool to in an interrogation as well as in battle, and I just like to see with that side of the role play aspect of it is just like interrogating an enemy, but using the feats in this particular class to do so, especially because it's I mean, extort truth at 6th level. You can hit a hidden cluster of nerves on a creature with precision and temporarily cause them to become mentally malleable, and then they have to make saving throw. And if they fail, they can't lie. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I mean, we just did some interrogation in our group, and we were pretty fist heavy in some of those. So it's kind of cool to see that there might be a more artful way to do it. That is an sort of nature to this class, which I think was kind of cool. I wouldn't have seen that in a monk arena. So.
Yeah. Enhanced interrogation techniques, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Enhanced interrogation.
No, to build on that, I actually really dug this. Like, I really like this subclass. I agree with you, Matt, that it thematically it kind of plays the whole way through. All of these abilities kind of tie into one another. I love the extract aspect. Because I always like being able to use a reaction. Like, anytime you can use a reaction in a turn, in my mind, that's a good thing. You're doing more on your turn, or even outside of your turn. And then you combine that with the Mind of Mercury. If I'm not mistaken, what could happen is you could take that reaction. Can you not then use Mind of Mercury to get another reaction on the same thing?
Yes, I mean I think that's the idea, is that
Yeah.
just as an additional reaction.
Yeah.
So you could use that to get have two reactions. So it's potentially, it's not I don't think it's a game breaking
No.
thing, but I think it's a nice little thing to pull under certain types of situations.
Yeah, and especially with that extract aspect, you can basically do it on once you've done it on a creature, it sticks on that creature for the rest of the fight. So if you do that on a boss, you're going to use flurry of blows at some point on that boss. You get the extract aspect, and now for the remainder of that boss fight, you can mix with not only the reaction but also get a Mind of Mercury in for an extra reaction. I mean, that sounds really cool to play. Mm-hmm. So I'm all about this. I'd love to give this a try at some point. If you're interested, you can check it out. It is up on DnDBeyond, or you can click on the link in the show notes to get some more information on that. But for us, we're going to take a step out for a moment, but stay tuned. We will be right back after the break.
As any tabletop role player would know, coffee is an essential commodity for those 4-hour sessions we all go through. And a great place to get that coffee is foundfamiliar.com. Found Familiar is a couple of people with a passion for coffee creation and D&D. And they've teamed up with favorite artists from all around the world to bring specialty grade coffee that celebrates the creativity sparked by Dungeons & Dragons and other TTRPGs. Use the coupon code Potomac RPG, all one word, at checkout for 10% discount on your purchase. That's at foundfamiliar.com. And with that, let's get back to the show.
How about another question? This post comes from Reddit user KDHD4, who asks, player backstory and contracts with devils. So one of my players made a tiefling character. He's new, and so I explained the lore of the tieflings, and then he made his backstory. Briefly, it goes as his great-grandfather, human family, made a pact with a devil in exchange of money and power, the classic type of deal. The PC was the first family member born a tiefling as the family bloodline was corrupted. He lived wealthily until his teens when he ran away to travel the world by himself. And then the game started when he was established in a city far away from his original home. The thing is, how can I make an interesting plot out of this devil pact thing? I know I don't need to, but I guess it would be interesting to create a plot hook out of this, as devils are always trying to get more and more out of exploiting the contracts. So I guess I'm looking for plot hooks out of this backstory. If info from my setting would help, it is a pretty generic medieval fantasy setting with all sorts of tropes and whatnot, since most of my players are first-timers, so I've gone with something more classic. Okay, Sarah, so sounds like a common pact with a devil here, but how can the DM involve this background in the campaign in an interesting way?
Oh, I mean, the low-hanging fruit here is that a pact was made, but it's not been entirely fulfilled yet. There's some details that that he's not aware of, maybe that he'll become aware of, that require, maybe someone down the line to do something. And I would even put a time limit on it. Like maybe he has to desecrate like 3 different temples or something like that by the time he reaches a certain age. And so like
it's the Amazing Race.
Yeah. No, but like
desecrate 3 temples within a day.
It's almost like or he has to do something that, you know how like you have to achieve 3 miracles to become a saint. So maybe he has to do the opposite of that by the time he turns, I don't know, 20 or whatever, or something bad. Yeah, three big, desecrating blasphemies, each unique, in order to save his family line, or maybe like something horrible will happen to him or the people that he loves who might still be alive. I think that would be really cool, because then it gives him, as long as it doesn't pull away from the group too much, but it can make it also part of what the group is going to be facing, because maybe now he's got dueling interests, right? It might be also to support the group's efforts, but if he has the opportunity to do the reversed miracle, shall we say, while there, he might take that chance, which might thwart what the group's trying to do. So it puts him in a really, really good character crisis.
Nice.
Which I think would be great.
I like it. All right, Matt, how about you? What you got?
Yeah, there's a couple things we don't know about the character. Like, what does the character do? I mean, if the character is a cleric of goody two-shoes god, then it makes it even more interesting. But I think it's kind of premised on a couple of ideas here with the contract. I mean, we don't know what exactly in it, but it could be that service was promised by a family descendant or something like that. Like someone made a deal and said, "Oh, and my children and grandchildren out to the 7th generation will fulfill such and such," in which case, the family's wealth or status could be on the line with this character fulfilling the contract. Now, if he doesn't care about what happens to the wealth of his family, then obviously that hook isn't there. But another thing that can happen is, a devil could show up and basically just start, dropping small favors in front of the character, right? It doesn't have to start with, "Aha, we're going to corrupt you to evil." It could be really, it could start with pretty small things, and get the character sort of, indebted, to the, not in a contractual sense, but just, psychologically indebted to a certain devil. And then have the devil mention, "Oh, by the way, you're such and such's great grandson. We do have this clause here, in the contract with your family about about whatever, help me a lot after I've helped you if you just, do these small things," right? You can always start small and just sort of turn up the pressure once you're in. Now, maybe there's a way out of the contract. That's another possibility. I mean, if you want to play a heroic angle more, it could be that, the family's on the hook for souls or service or whatever, right? But maybe there's some escape clause in the contract that if the character manages to fulfill, maybe like rescue 7 princesses from 7 different kingdoms or something like that, right? And, it's something suitably mythic, right? Then it can actually, then it's an escape clause in the contract. And so that's a couple of ways to do it. And it may not be wealth. I mean, it could be that the contract or non-fulfillment of the contract will put the family in a precarious political position. I mean, there's a few different ways to exert pressure. So it could be either, you could play it, the way I see it is there's sort of 2 ways to go. I mean, one way is exerting pressure to make the character fulfill the contract. The other way is maybe the more heroic way is, the house is screwed, but there's some escape clause in the contract and there's a way out. And everything I see is sort of a variation on those ideas.
Yeah,
I love your inclusion of a World of Warcraft fetch quest in terms of princesses. 7 princesses from 7 lands. It's like, here comes the grind. No, that great ideas. Yeah, you pretty much touched on it. I love the incorporation of moral dilemmas, as unfortunately you guys are aware. I love putting that player in a position where they have to do something that does not sit with them very well, and I love that idea of the destruction of family wealth and status and everything as an angle there, depending on how much the player actually cares about that, or character cares about that. The idea of this, okay, am I willing to do this bad thing in order for my family to be more secure and retain their status? Those kind of dilemmas that you can put a player into can be really, really cool within a story. So don't be afraid to really beat them over the head with those and put them in some tough situations, because whatever they choose, you know that you're going to have 5 other plot points that can expand from that one choice that they made. So as a DM, I think you'll be in a good spot there. So best of luck, KDHD4. Would love to hear how it goes with your new players. And awesome job, getting some first timers involved in the hobby. That's really great to see, and wish you the best of luck. Now, creating a character backstory can be a real challenge. It's a delicate balance of detail and open-ended usable information for the DM to work with. So let's see what kind of backstory we can come up with for a character in our long-running segment, Let's Build Something. Welcome to Let's Build Something, where we get to put our creativity to the test and build something live for all the world to hear. In this week's segment, we're going to craft a backstory for a brand new character. Now, we had a lot of fun using the website whothefuckismydndcharacter.com a couple weeks ago, so let's use it again. It'll give us a seed to work from. Then we get to do some character work here and come up with some background and knives to explore. You guys ready for this?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's jump in. All right, so do you guys all have the website up and ready?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, so we are all going to refresh at the same time and get our new character that we're going to be working with. So on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
All right, so Sarah, let's start with you. Just give us the little tidbit, and then we'll circle back around for the actual background.
Okay, I have an obnoxious halfling druid from the poor surroundings of the capital city who has a debilitating fear of wide open spaces. How is this guy an adventurer?
Awesome. All right, Matt, what do you have?
Okay, I have a confident halfling warlock from the deep wood who has no sense of smell.
Interesting. All right. And I ended up with an unstable half-elf ranger from Briarwood Castle who failed to protect the royal family. So, all right.
Ooh, that's a good one.
So, circling back, Sarah, what are you thinking of for your character in terms of background?
Oh, I'm trying to... All right, so obnoxious halfling druid from the poor surroundings of the capital city who has a debilitating fear of wide open spaces. So what this conjures for me is a maybe someone who grew up not only poor, but also was like maybe a pariah in his or her own family, to the extent that they made them hide whenever people came over or locked him up. And so that is why he's a little bit more comfortable with very tight spaces. In fact, maybe at points he was kind of left there for a couple of days. And that's also probably where he became maybe a druid of spores and stuff, because of the things that would grow in this really, really poor location. Or he would go and hide because of some of the threats from some of the visitors and stuff like that. So I'm kind of thinking that it wasn't a happy childhood, but he definitely found some strength in his abilities as a druid to commune with the things that are in these darker, smaller places. And that kind of made him a little bit more bolder. But yeah, definitely agoraphobic, like does not like to be outside, which is weird for a druid. Like this is really, really hard here.
Like, only indoor gardening, only.
Yeah, only, yeah. And maybe dug some tunnels, or, maybe he's just way more comfortable in the earth. In the earth. So yeah, I'm thinking wasn't well liked, made up his own friends in the dark, kept hidden. And maybe the few times he did venture out, it was really, really bad, like very traumatic experiences for him. So that's why he just sticks to the ground and maybe even burrowing under.
Plenty of stuff to work with there. That's excellent. All right, Matt, how about you? What do you got?
Yeah, so I think this halfling's he's gonna be a warlock of the Fey Lords, whatever they're called. I don't remember what mechanically they are. But I think the big question is, why does he have no sense of smell? And I think for that one, I'm actually going to go with a very, I think, fairy-esque explanation, which is that at some point when he made a pact with these fairy lords, the price of the pact was like, the smell of the most beautiful rose, and so he went on this quest, to find, the most beautiful rose he can find, or the sweetest smelling rose he can find. But he misunderstood when the Fey Lords wanted the smell of the sweetest rose. It wasn't a particular object they wanted, but actually his ability to smell the most, right? So right, it's like your heart's desire, right? And you lose the ability to desire anything. This is the same idea, that the sense that the sweetest smell, and he loses, and he says, oh, I'll find this thing which has a sweet sense of smell. But actually what his Fey Lords wanted was his ability to smell, right? Because in a lot of fairy tales, and dwarves and Norse mythology and all that stuff, usually the price or the thing is something that has a symbolic weight. And I think for his pact that kind of would make sense.
Very cool.
So I think that's kind of, I think, the key character hook. I haven't really thought about his childhood or where he's from or
but I love
pages,
it.
No, I like that.
But I think that single hook is like, oh, no sense of smell. I mean, you can go with a boring explanation. He took a golf ball to the nose, or you can go with something kind of a little more, mystical, and I think that works really well for the character.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Excellent job. All right, so for mine, I got that unstable half-elf ranger from the castle who failed to protect the royal family. I'm going to take a bit more of a serious approach here, and I'm going to say, like, for a half-elf ranger to become part of the royal family guard means there's been some success or heroics in the past. So I'm going to play him as a character who was deeply involved in the warfare, whether that was fighting demons or whatever forces of evil. And this has like deeply affected him, almost a PTSD kind of effect. And he's haunted by these voices and these visions. And it just so happened that, one of these hit during an attempt on the royal family's life. And he was basically left useless while the royal family was being attacked, and the shame from this event and his ongoing struggles with this effect on him has led him to basically run away in a sense. So he's out there and he's kind of coming to terms with his failures and this constant voice and vision in his head that are so debilitatory. Whatever the word is. It just kind of shuts him down. And I think that's a good plot hook in terms of number one.
Dark.
It is dark. A way to fix that, a way to get past that, or just increasing the pressure on that player as they go through the campaign of these voices and visions getting worse and worse, and maybe striking during inopportune times. Could you imagine if one of these happens during a big battle scene with the rest of your party, and suddenly this player is down? So I think there could be some interesting plot hooks out of that, and again, a bit more of a serious aspect to the character that you can dive into some real issues with if you have that type of campaign that's willing to go down that road. You can have some real impactful and emotionally stirring events happen with a character like that. So that's my idea.
Sounds like it would be good for a horror campaign.
It would be.
Yeah,
it would be.
Yeah.
That'd be great. So for the listeners, that gives you an idea of some ways that you can go about building the backstory, always incorporating at least a one or two plot hooks that the DM can use. And it's not easy, but if you got a seed, like this website, perfect example of it, and kind of gives an idea of how we work through it. Hopefully that might help somebody out. So well done, guys. That was Let's Build Something. Now let's get into our last question of the week. This post comes from Reddit user Adiran1, who asks, backstory ideas. My player asked me to help him come up with backstory ideas for him to help him get his character fleshed out and real feeling. He is a human cleric who is part of the knowledge domain. His background is spy. He works as an informant gathering information to sell to the highest bidder. Does anybody have any ideas for his past or interesting reasons why he might have become a cleric or informant? I mean, yeah, this seems ripe for the picking here. There's so many directions that you can go. Matt, what do you think about this? What ideas can you give Adiran?
Yeah, so I have several going sort of from maybe the most mundane to sort of the most fantastic. So, I think, there's kind of, the easy explanation is that, well, I mean, this is it's the family business. They've always been information brokers. Alternatively, you can go the other way, and you can make him an orphan, living on the street, and this is the way he makes money because information is valuable. So this is sort of like Varys from Game of Thrones, right? That is his background,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Nice.
Another might be that it's simply a vice of his character. I mean, maybe he has, obsession with a particular type of knowledge or a particular type of information, and he needs to get his fix. I mean, he might be, or she might be, I don't know if it's a guy or a girl, could be, into scandalous gossip or a voyeur or something, and really the whole information gathering is just, his way of scratching the itch. Alternatively, it could be that he's or she, I don't think we know the gender is, that this character maybe comes from a political, family. And so the character maybe is a spy, but really is a politician or is very much enmeshed with a politician. And so that there would be a loss of influence or stature if they didn't, keep up with the information. And so, being a cleric of knowledge is just really, a professional extension from that. A more fantastic way of going about it for a background might be that maybe the character, for some reason, suffers some kind of supernatural curse. I mean, maybe they need new information the way that somebody needs food, right? Like maybe this cleric has to go out and find things out because if he doesn't, he'll basically starve to death. Yeah. So that's a kind of more fantastic, magical idea, but I think that could also work depending on the nature of the setting.
Well, sweet ideas. Sarah, what do you have?
Well, first I want to commend Matt on his ladder and of escalating sort of different circumstances from mundane to fantastical. That was really great. I think that Matt touched on this. I think one of the classic sort of ways to go with a person of a religious influence who also is into selling information would be maybe they are into the politics, like the Bene Gesserit or Varys, or any think of any fantasy novel where someone who has a religious influence and is hearing people's hurts and wounds or seeing things that they shouldn't see is selling that information so that they can eventually ascend to the point where they're actually manipulating entire governments because that's where the real power is. Maybe that's the agenda for this person. It could also be like, I know that D&D is very has their wheelhouses as far as like what different clerics worship and what the nature of those groups are and what is good and what is bad and all that's kind of already defined. But I actually really love it when you kind of get a factional rift in these areas. And it could be that he's part of a new faction that is rising as far as how they interpret their people's or their particular domains.
A schism in the church.
Yeah, schism in the church.
Exactly. Yeah, that's so that great. Gives a little bit of rivalry with maybe other members of the church, but also, maybe it's also they got to take down that church because they see that they've gone astray or something like that. Something more interesting. But as for why they became a cleric or an informant, maybe it was just fascination with what that church represented to them growing up, and then this disillusionment as they continue to go through it, and then they want to make a change. Or maybe it's because your family, like Matt said, is political, but maybe it's like your family comes from maybe its own private sort of, I would say, sect that focuses on manipulating bloodlines and or overturning governments, and they put you with this particular faith so that you could represent them there, and maybe they have different fingers in different faiths. So it's like a shadow sect, shall we say?
Yeah, I like it. I like it. Well, help me out here. Is knowledge domain inherently good, evil, neutral? Like, where does it sit on that spectrum?
Doesn't really have a moral component.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So it's pretty
Any
much
god of knowledge, good or bad, could have it. I mean,
yeah.
You know.
So I mean, it's open in that's both makes it more open and kind of closes off some possible storylines that you can go with. You know, one thing I see is, you know, a conflict in what selling that information did. You know, maybe because of the information sold, it got a bunch of innocent people killed, or something happened that as a character doesn't sit well with them. Maybe it was something in the past that happened when they were truly an information broker, and now they're looking for a more refined or Zen-like experience of knowledge that's not so much about who pays for it, but just in terms of gaining knowledge. Honestly, out of all the ideas, Matt, your idea of, you know, using knowledge as food, I mean, that's the winner in my mind. Like, you got it down pat.
That resonated for me too.
That was an amazing one. Yeah, absolutely. I would love to see a player come up with something like that. So hopefully, Adiran one, hopefully that helps a little bit. Would love to hear how your campaign is going. For us, that's going to do it for this episode. Remember, if you want to send in your questions or anything you find on the internet, you can send them to questions@PotomacRPG.com. Check out our store for merch at teespring.com/stores/PotomacRPG. And if you'd like to support the Potomac RPG podcast, you can find us on coffee.com/Potomac RPG. Lastly, you can follow us at Potomac RPG, all one word, on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Thanks for being on today. I thank you to the rest of the Potomac RPG crew, and of course, all of our wonderful listeners out there. So for the Potomac RPG podcast, I'm Adam.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Matt.
Until next time, keep those dice rolling, keep those stories coming, and
never
stop playing.
Oh yeah, I see. That doesn't make any effing sense. Okay, I see.
Oh yeah. I guess
it's different for everyone.
Yeah.
Yep, different for everyone.